I am so excited to talk to you about relationships. The greatest desire and need of the human experience is to feel bonded, connected, and attached. Unfortunately, we live in a culture that overly sexualizes that everything in our bonding needs are turned into sexual and romantic love instead of the various forms of attachment and bonding and connection that's good for us. And if we place all of that on an idealized romantic partner, how much weight and expectation that they'll feel and eventually will fail. And so if we can broaden our scope for our conversation today to not just focus on romantic idealized love, but all the various ways that as relational beings, we are designed to connect, to belong, to be embedded into relationships, something deeper and more profound than just the isolated self-experience. The problem is, for generations, we've had a shame culture where when my needs are not appropriately met in my formative years, then I don't know how to give that to the next generation. And so narcissism breeds narcissism. And I'm not talking about pop psychology. I'm talking about the everyday experience of most of us, me included, are inherently selfish. Where we think about ourselves, we think about what's good for me, and it comes in very deceptive ways where we may still be caring about others, listening in helping professions, and yet still so totally self-absorbed at an emotional level and have no idea that we are. And I can speak for myself that I'm in a helping profession, and yet there's so many times that my own selfishness, my own emotional vacancy and lack of attachment and attunement needs, how that made me vulnerable to bootleg, want to get my needs met through the helping profession itself. And so I'm so grateful that I've had good mentors and good training that prepared me for that, so that when those moments come, that I would recognize them quickly and easily. But that happens in all of our relationships, not just as professionals in a helping profession, but in all of our relationships. We're looking for someone to fill and satiate that emotional hunger that we've had all of our lives. And we live in a culture where the next romantic movie, the next love song, the next celebrity couple that we follow, it's trying to create this illusion that if we just have that, then we'll be happy. The problem is that creates idolatry. And idolatry is any time that I'm looking to something that's incapable fundamentally of meeting that need, trying to get that to meet my need. Another human can never fully satisfy today all of your emotional needs throughout the trajectory of your life. There were certain windows where we needed those emotional needs met, and when they were not, then it leaves a vacancy. It leaves a hole where the soul is still longing and looking for something. And then we look for what today, kind of like an apple, trying to fill and satisfy something that's so much deeper than what food or pornography or a marriage or gambling or shopping or fame or achieving a goal could ever fulfill. The brain doesn't know the difference between the original need and the objective that we go toward. And so when I start thinking, if I just have an attachment relationship early in life, and if that's not satisfied, then the brain will go, well, what does hit the reward pathway? What does make me feel better? What is that instant gratification? And in culture, we're given so many options of instant gratification, of things that we could turn to, another item to buy, how a lot of IO psychology, advertising psychology, corporation psychology, where they've really utilized psychology to try to manipulate people into dissatisfaction, to try to create this illusion that if I buy this product, I'll have this life or this body or this relationship or this sense of success. Those legitimate needs are constantly manipulated in our society for financial gain, for power, for people to vote for you, different ways that humans have harnessed that. But it still leaves us empty. And more so, it leaves us resentful and angry and upset. And so when I work with couples in particular, there's so many times that they're disappointed and they're frustrated, fighting about a surface topic, and don't realize that it's actually a much deeper resentment, because there was an expectation that you were supposed to satisfy this deep need and yearning in my soul. And that when you didn't, I'm devastated. I feel hurt. I feel betrayed. I put my hope in you, and yet you disappointed me. The hard thing is we don't even know that we're being held to those standards. We don't even know that we're placing that standard on somebody. But since we're young, we have been taught and groomed into idolatry, into looking to someone else, into this idealized romantic relationship where they will always listen and always understand and always get us. And in that, then I will be satisfied. I will be whole. I will be content. I'll be a generous person. I'll stop being selfish and narcissistic, which most of us don't even realize we are, but we are. And I'll just be so content in this relationship. The problem is that's not real life. No other person can satisfy you today for emotional needs that were not met in the past. We have a longing for attachment that goes so much deeper. And that's where, when we invite Jesus into those emotional places, not just at a mental ascent, not in just like lobbing out a prayer or kind of like a volleyball out there, but a sense of kind of opening up with deep breaths, using your imagination, visualizing him holding you as an infant, picking you up and holding you in his mind and his heart and relating, soothing your soul, reassuring you that you feel settled. And from that place of settled, you can now start building a confident sense of self. And from a confident sense of self, then we can bond and attach and play and engage with others in really meaningful, beautiful ways. Unlike most couples, me included, that I'm looking for that other person to satisfy, to meet a need that they can't, because I'm looking for an identity that they can't satisfy. They can't tell me who I am, not at an emotional level. People can say encouraging things and it can feel really great, but how many times have they said that and then we walk away still feeling lackluster, still feeling not good enough? Because there is a deeper transformative work that has to happen, that if it didn't happen in those formative years, all the encouragement today of the best spouse or partner in the world cannot satisfy. And I cannot properly attach to someone else unless I know who I am, and from a healthy anchor be able to engage the other without it being a narcissistic need for them to mirror me, to listen to me, hear me all the time. There becomes an imbalance when we're constantly needing them to affirm who I am, agree with me, never side with the other person, always side with me, always see it from my perspective. That's not real life. People cannot do that because everybody's camera angle of relationship and perspective is fundamentally different. And so we're setting ourselves and our relationships up for unfair standards and expectations where they will disappoint us and will disappoint them. And we think we're talking about finances. We think we're talking about sex. We think we talk about parenting. But in real life, it's an expectation that has not been met because it's an expectation I didn't know I had. And it's an expectation that they can never fundamentally fill. And so we're creating this disappointment loop where we idealize, we put the person on a pedestal. This is going to be the best relationship. They're going to know me and it's going to be so great. And then reality. And they're going to eventually fall off that. And those are emotional breaches. Those are those moments where we don't connect, where we feel alone and sad and disappointed and frustrated. And from that disconnect, because it's an unconscious disconnect, it's a need I didn't even express, a rule book I'm holding against them that they don't know they're being held to that standard, then I don't even realize the disappointment. I don't even realize the level and the gravity of what I'm holding them to and why it hurts so badly when they fail to meet my expectations and when those breaches then create tears between the heart and we get further and further apart. And from that place of disconnect, it's really hard to try to reconnect a heart when those fundamental tears have never been acknowledged, worked through, or met in the appropriate ways. As long as today I'm still expecting this person to do X, Y, or Z, to make me feel X, Y, or Z, they will always fail, and we will always be disappointed. And the narrative becomes, if you just loved me more, you would have done this. If you just loved me more, if you accepted me, if you cared about me, you would have cheered me on when I tried to get that new job. You would have supported me in the way that I expected. You would have made me feel beautiful. You would have made me feel respected. The problem is that they may be doing the best that they can as an adult to an adult. But when I have an unmet emotional need from early in life where I didn't feel respected, where I didn't feel seen and precious and treasured and valued, then that on the inside creates a longing, a loop, where I continue to resonate with this feeling of not being respected, cared about, etc. Furthermore, if any part of me is stuck there, then there is a hook. And a hook is any time that I have a belief something is going to happen, and then unconsciously go about doing things to elicit that response from the person, where I'm proving my confirmation accurate. So it's called confirmation bias, where I'm looking for that to be true. So if I have an unconscious belief that I'm not going to be listened to, that I'm not worthy of love, that I'm not special or important, then I'm going to look for that. And I'm actually going to treat the other person as if they're already doing it, which will elicit that response from them. And then in my conscious mind, I go, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're just like everyone else in the past. I can't believe you just treated me XYZ. You were supposed to be different. And this breach and this tearing apart from the idealized version of who I thought they were versus just falling in love with the frumpy, imperfect, freckled, flawed, wonderful person in front of me. We create at an unconscious level this illusion, and we're relating with an illusion, and there's a lack of intimacy when I'm wanting them to meet needs that they cannot. And so that pressure puts too much stress on the relationship, and especially on men who desire to feel respected and like their effort matters and what they're doing is making a difference. And when they don't feel that, it definitely hits in that deep place of shame, inadequacy, not feeling enough. I can't make you happy. Nothing I do is right. No matter how hard I try, it will never be the right thing. And so then there's a natural, I will try harder, and then I'll give up and go, well, fine, I won't even try. And instead of staying stuck in these loops, my encouragement as a psychologist is for you to take that step back, to stop blaming the other person and thinking it's their responsibility to make you feel supported, loved, respected, encouraged, whatever. But to step back and say, do I believe that about myself? Is there an area where a need was not met? Did I have physical people in my life that were my caregivers, but they weren't smiling and seeing and knowing and engaging me? Did they tell me, it's okay to feel like that? That's a normal emotion. It's okay to be angry. This is what we do with anger. Was there a guidance, or was there a lack of guidance, a lack of feedback where they said, go figure it out, go to your room until you can come and rejoin us? And while sometimes that's appropriate, it's not appropriate if the person doesn't have a skill to do that on their own, and they're being asked to do something that they haven't been equipped with. How many times we do that as couples? Well, we expect the other person to just know, and I shouldn't have to tell you. That's totally unfair. They haven't been given the skills. They haven't been given the rule book of what I expect of them. And I don't even know what the rule book is until they fail it, and now I'm very aware that they just broke that rule. And we do that with such confidence that we are right, instead of realizing relationships are so beautiful and so breakable and so nuanced. And we want to come with a posture of humility and curiosity and stepping back and saying, what is my role in this dynamic? It's not just this person. They are not my problem. There is a dynamic between us where we're feeding into something and they're feeding into something. And now we have a conscious relationship where we're going to marriage therapy, we're going to conferences, we're trying to have the conversations and apply the skills, but yet our hearts feel so disconnected. Because again, those breaches I talked about were those failed expectations where that person can't make us constantly feel loved and beautiful and important and respected and valued. That's where the heart disconnects. And so that attachment got strained. And the more that it's neglected and the more time we spend talking about the topics or just watching TV together and not actually engaging and just avoiding the issue or talking at, you talk to my in-laws like this and blah, 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 and the fight that whatever we're carrying on for a really long time. None of that is actually resolving the need to reconnect, for the heart to engage. And so that's where I encourage people to pause, to do their own work where they go, what is being triggered in me? Why am I getting so emotional? When people tell me as a therapist, well, they did this and this and this, and there's like, obviously I have the right to be offended at them. And sure, I validate the emotion, I validate their experience 100%. But then I ask, what's causing your volume to be turned up? Why is that such a big breach in you? Is it just this one moment? Or has it happened in the relationship before? Has it happened in other relationships in your past? Did that happen in some symbolic way that might be a little bit similar in your childhood? Was there something that was modeled or that you saw and you were like, I vow to never have that in my relationships? There's so many layers to our human experience. And the problem is we use a very formulaic, use this tool, use this intervention, talk like this, use I statements, do these things, which are great. And I use those. I apply all of those in my work with people. But it still doesn't bring heart transformation. Those are good. That is good problem solving. But if we never get back to the breach, where our hearts got disconnected, where a failed expectation was not met, where we felt alone and unsupported and discouraged and disillusioned in a relationship. We need to go back to those moments. We need to reconnect. Pause the conversation of whatever you think the fight is about and do the self-discipline work to work on yourself. And then with humility, lowering your guard and inviting that heart-to-heart connection where we say, I'm only bringing this up because I want you to feel safe. I want your heart to know that you are my priority, that nobody can replace you. And on behalf of every person who has, I am so sorry. It's not okay that you've been taken for granted, that your heart's been neglected or rejected or unwanted. And I never want to do that to you again. And would you help me to achieve security and connection and confidence in your heart? Would you use your words to help me know when I'm meeting it and when I'm not? And would you help me to be in the place of repairing and restoration and renewal instead of expectation that I should just know, instead of expectation that I should just do it if I love you? That's not fair, and that's placing too much pressure on me and on the relationship. So I hope that this helps, gives you some tools to think not just at the head level, but also at the heart level of how to really humble ourselves, how to reconnect, and how to do the heart work so that those breaches get reconnected slowly. And then we talk about problem solving. Then you use your I statements. Then you use all your marriage tools or couple tools. You go to your conferences. You learn the skills that are so vital. I'm not knocking any of them. But we do have to stop and figure out at that very unconscious emotional level, what is my heart feeling? When did I stop feeling safe with you? When did I stop trusting you? When did my heart say, I'm not going to go there anymore? When did I start to section off and compartmentalize and start to walk on eggshells instead of us going, let's have the hard conversation. Let's lean in with softness, with tenderness and compassion instead of, I need to be right. I need to prove my point. I need to continue to have the same conversation over and over. But instead, learning how to soften your approach, how to really focus on my objective here is for your heart to feel safe with me. And I'm willing to do that. And forgive me for every time that I didn't recognize that your heart was starting to feel unsafe. As a woman, as much as a man, we need to have that conversation. It is not just men who make women feel unsafe. There are lots of things that women can do to shame and emasculate and shut down a man. Women, we need to inspire and encourage and pursue the man in our life. And men, you definitely want to be soft and tender, that she feels seen and known and safe. We want to be the kind of couples that we can take the armor off. That life is hard. We go out, we get beat up, we're working, we're trying to make ends meet, we're serving people, thankless society. Lots of people can just rub us wrong. That we want our home to be a refuge. You want it to be a place where I can take off that armor and all my flaws and all my imperfections be seen. Not necessarily tolerated, we work on those things, but they're also not judged and criticized and pointed at or shamed. We want to have an emotional intelligence where we're safe to say, hey, can we address that at some point? But I want you to know right now is not the time, and I just want you to feel held and known. And that's not necessarily physical touch, although sometimes it can be. There's a holding that can happen when one person says, I see you and I know you, and I can hold and contain all of the messy, all the spilling, all the anger and the upset, whatever you're dealing with, I can hold that and contain it, and then help you contain and put you back together. Now that's in a beautiful, healthy context. That's not in an abusive relationship. Don't misapply a healthy tool to something that it doesn't apply to. And then on the other side, you want to create space where you can let down your guard and you can be messy and undone and angry and upset, and have the other person create a holding environment where they're like, I can hold that. I can contain that. I'm not going to be afraid of your mess or your emotion, like maybe many of us from our childhood, that we didn't do emotion well often, especially anger and some of the less fun emotions that people get very uncomfortable and adverse. And if we're not willing to go there in ourselves, we're definitely not willing to let someone else go there and support them in that process. So again, it all comes back to self-stewardship, of doing the hard work, looking at yourself first, finding out where was a need not met that I've been unconsciously placing on the people in front of me, whether spouse or friend or a pastor or a parent in adulthood, a colleague, anybody that you've been placing that pressure on for them to meet those needs. It's not appropriate, and they cannot meet those fundamental deep needs. Sure, there's surface stuff that we talk about, and every other marriage conference you'll hear that. I'm talking about those deep, unresolved needs to feel identity, security, comfort, value, worth, respect. Some of those core ones really have to be met at a deeper and more involved process. And I'll do future videos where we talk about those. But at first, I just want you to have realistic expectations of what you can put on somebody and what you can't. And you always want to make sure that your rule book is being consciously stated and articulated in a way that they can hear it and not feel threatened or attacked by it, and in a way that they feel there's collaboration and not just stuff lumped on them that you need to always make me feel safe. That's not real life. I don't mean physical safe. Yes, you should always feel physically safe. I mean emotionally. Like, we're gonna have off days, we're gonna have weird moments. There's gonna be these disconnects, and there needs to be latitude for that. There needs to be permission and space for us to be imperfect. And so when you're engaging, please create conversation and opportunity when you're rested, when you're well fed, when you're not stressed, when you're not multitasking or have 1,000 other things on your brain, but that we're setting aside the time when we're refreshed and engaged and have the capacity to pour into a meaningful heart connection, and then clearing out the lies, the beliefs, the different things that we didn't even realize we were holding as a fence against each other. So those things can be cleared out. So there can be joy and spontaneity and intimacy and playfulness, because those hearts need to be synced up. They need to be reconnected. And that is my hope. That is my hope, is that we don't just endure relationships or pull the ripcord and get out of relationships prematurely. Sure, there's abusive ones. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the normal everyday relationship that becomes stale, that becomes roommates, because the heart connection has been lost. That the reward pathway of something new and shiny is no longer being activated. And so now it's like, I guess we're not in love anymore. When in reality, if we continue to press in and resync our hearts, that attachment, that bonding, all the beautiful hormones, pheromones, they create the oxytocin and the happy and the cuddle on the inside, that you can have a vivacious, delightful relationship if you put in the work. If you continue to sync your hearts up and have those hard conversations, lean into relationship and intimacy. If you believe that it's possible, you'll bring that out of the other person, because hooks work in the good way as well. I can hook you into being optimistic and positive and engaging and believing that us putting this work into this relationship will produce good harvest. I am so excited for your journey. Please leave comments. I can't wait to continue to have conversation with you about this, because there are so many different angles, and there's always a one-off or an example of something that's not what I'm talking about in this moment. But we do kind of have to narrow in to talk about just normal everyday couples and not apply that to unhealthy situations and vice versa. So thank you, and I look forward to hearing your comments and engaging with you in this. Bye.